Sometimes a match doesn't need drama to feel massive. Sometimes all it needs is tension. Slow burn tension. That creeping sense that something enormous is on the line. Not because it's do or die, but because winning anyway is what separates the great teams from the myth makers. And tonight, Barcelona gave us just that. A knife-edge, 1-0 victory over Mallorca that will echo a little louder than it probably should. Let's just start there. 1-0, 40 shots, 78% possession, one single goal. This was a match Barcelona dominated from whistle to whistle, in every metric, every moment, and every mood. And yet it still felt like it was hanging by a thread until the very end. Why? Because this wasn't about the scoreboard. This was about momentum. It was about identity. It was about proving that even with tired legs, a depleted squad, and the long shadows of Real Madrid and the Champions League lurking, Barcelona can still play a match like artists under pressure and win like street fighters in an alley. This game was the thesis statement of a team that isn't just winning, they're growing teeth. There's something deeply ironic about this 1-0. It almost feels sarcastic. Barcelona spent 95 minutes relentlessly sculpting chances out of nothing, threading passes like silk through Mallorca's iron curtain. They created what felt like infinite openings, 40 shots for heaven's sake, and came away with just one goal. And yet that one goal, it felt like a crowbar cracking open the entire story of this season. Because this wasn't a lucky break. It wasn't a last-minute rescue act. It wasn't a gift. It was earned. Every inch of that Dani Olmo goal, from Eric Garcia's perfectly timed pass to the way Olmo ghosted into the box, felt like the payoff of everything that came before. Barcelona battered the door down for 45 minutes and walked through it 41 seconds into the second half. And it wasn't just about the 3 points. This win puts them 7 points clear at the top of La Liga. 7. In a title race that looked like it might slip away back in January, they now have daylight. And they have done it while rotating heavily, missing key players, and fielding a lineup that, let's be honest, would have scared no one at the start of the season. But now you look at this Barcelona and you don't see names, you see patterns, you see confidence, you see belief. They are becoming that rarest kind of team, one that finds its flow even when its best players aren't on the pitch. And let's talk about what this means for the bigger picture. The Spanish Super Cup is already in the bag. The Copa del Rey final looms, against Real Madrid no less. The Champions League is still alive. And now La Liga, it's not done, but it's tipping. This win didn't just keep the dream of a quadruple alive, it made it feel real. And let's not undersell Mallorca here. They weren't pushovers. They came into this match looking for their third straight clean sheet, and for long stretches they made Barcelona work for every touch. They parked the bus, yes, but they parked it with precision. They even had a goal, briefly, that was ruled out for offside. They threatened just enough to keep hearts fluttering. But make no mistake, this was Barcelona's night. And not because they romped or dazzled or blew anyone away. No, this was their night because they suffered and still won. Because they made chaos look like choreography. Because they bent frustration into fuel and turned dominance into something more than just data. The scoreboard might say 1-0, but it felt like a turning point. And if you're Hansi Flick, sitting on the bench tonight watching this team grind Mallorca into submission without breaking rhythm, you're not just thinking about next weekend. You're thinking about May. You're thinking about lifting things. Because if this team keeps playing like this, keeps creating, keeps believing, keeps finding that one goal even when they deserve 5, then no trophy is off the table. You ever watch a football match where the first half feels like a wave constantly crashing against the rocks, endless, relentless, but never quite breaking through, and then the second half begins and the dam just splits? That was Barcelona versus Mallorca. It wasn't 2 different games, no, that's too easy. It was one long siege. But that whistle to open the second half, that was the cannon blast. That was the moment where control became consequence. And Dani Olmo's goal, 41 seconds after the restart, was the payoff for a first half that felt like it was building pressure with every pass, every miss, every breath. Let's start at the top. The first half was football's version of a long exhale. Barcelona had 24 shots before halftime. 24. That's not a typo. 24 attempts, 1.94 expected goals, 78% possession. This was domination without reward. It was like watching a locksmith try every key on the ring but find every lock rusted shut. And Mallorca? Oh, Mallorca were under siege. But they didn't just sit back like passengers. No, they played the role of the cunning survivor. Every clearance, every block, every flailing save from Roman, it was like they were trying to stitch time together, hoping that if they just held out long enough, fate might swing their way. And for a moment, it nearly did. There was that surreal moment right before halftime. A lightning counterattack. Mori clean through, the net ripples, celebration. Silenced, offside, hope raised and crushed in a heartbeat. That was Mallorca's half in a nutshell, flickers of rebellion buried under Barcelona's tidal wave. But then came the restart. Blink and you'd miss it. Barcelona kicked off the second half like a team that had never left the pitch. There was no adjustment period, no stretching of muscles or finding the tempo again. No, the gears were already turning. 41 seconds in, Eric Garcia slots a sharp, intelligent pass through the lines and Dani Olmo, ghosting in like a memory, tucks it past Roman. Cold. Ruthless. Beautiful. That goal didn't explode the game open, it clarified it. Suddenly, the story made sense. All that first-half wastefulness had been the setup. And now Barcelona could breathe, or so we thought. Because instead of settling into comfort, what followed was something more tense. Not panicked, just haunted. You could feel the pressure in the stands. One goal never feels like enough, especially when you've already missed 23 times. You start to wonder, will the football gods punish that waste? Barcelona didn't back down. They pressed, probed, shot from every angle. Fermin Lopez came on and stung Roman's palms. Yamal had a one-on-one saved. Pau Victor unleashed a missile that demanded everything from the keeper. But the net stayed quiet. And then, as the match edged into its final quarter, Mallorca started sniffing the air. They could feel it too, the thinness of that lead. They brought on Prats. Domenech whipped in a dangerous ball. Rilo rose on a corner. Every half chance felt bigger than it should have. It was like watching a horror film where the monster never shows up, but you can hear the music swelling anyway. Barcelona made their changes. Rafinha, Pau Victor, Gerard Martin, Frankie de Jong, but nothing really shifted the rhythm. They were still the aggressor. They still owned the ball. But that second goal, the one that would let everyone exhale, never came. So the final minutes dragged like a heartbeat skipping every third beat. A 4-minute stretch of stoppage time felt like an eternity. Mallorca won a corner in the 89th, a single corner that felt like it might erase 90 minutes of Barcelona's supremacy. But the clearance came. The whistle blew, 1-0. Relief. And that's the beauty of this match. It's not a classic because of the scoreline. It's a classic because of how it felt. The first half was art without applause. The second half was the applause without the encore. And in the middle, a Barcelona team that looks more like a champion with every ugly, glorious, grinding win. Let's talk about these two teams, Barcelona and Mallorca, and how, for 95 minutes, they danced to the same music with wildly different steps. Because this wasn't just a match of haves and have-nots. It wasn't a lion mauling a lamb. It was a psychological duel wrapped in the illusion of a mismatch. And that's what made it so gripping. Barcelona. They entered the Estadio Olímpic Luis Companys carrying not just the weight of expectation, but the burden of potential. They were supposed to win this match. They were meant to dominate. The table said so. The stats said so. Every thread of this season's storyline pointed in that direction, and they did dominate, in every numerical sense imaginable. 78% possession, 40 shots, over 3 expected goals. But the more fascinating thing? They dominated without ever looking relaxed. That says something. About their hunger, about their youth, about their evolution. This is not a team coasting on autopilot. This is not the Barcelona of yesteryear, stroking the ball around the park with smug inevitability. No, this is a Barcelona still building its identity. Fast, vertical, raw around the edges, but undeniably alive. Every attack has urgency. Every missed chance feels personal. Every player looks like he's trying to prove something. Not to us, but to themselves. And that's what makes this season so compelling. You can see the old Barcelona DNA, the triangles, the press, the positional play, but it's been remixed. It's more chaotic, more direct. There's a touch of desperation in the dominance, and it makes the football real. You don't feel like you're watching perfection. You feel like you're watching people chasing it. Then there's Mallorca. Mallorca, who showed up with a game plan that looked defensive on paper, but brave in practice. Because parking the bus at this stadium against this team isn't cowardice. It's strategy. It's survival. And more than that, it was almost successful. They defended like warriors. You have to give them that. It wasn't passive, it was calculated. Every block, every clearance, every stretched leg had a purpose. They weren't just absorbing pressure, they were managing chaos. And for 45 minutes, they walked the tightrope without falling. And let's not forget, they had their moment. The goal, the offside, the almost. Mori streaking through and finishing like a veteran, only to be met by the cold, cruel hand of the assistant's flag. It was offside, yes, but it was also a reminder. This team can bite. They're not just tourists in a top-tier stadium. They came here with a suitcase full of ambition and nearly stole something. Jagoba Arasate has built a team that plays with a chip on its shoulder. They don't have the flair, they don't have the payroll, but what they do have is identity and structure, and a keeper, Roman, who put in a shift worthy of any headline. And that's the thing. These were two teams playing wildly different sports at times, one trying to paint a masterpiece, the other trying to survive a storm. But in that contrast, there was symmetry, because both of them were doing exactly what they needed to do to win. It just happened to be Barcelona's night. Still, credit where it's due. Mallorca made Barcelona earn every inch, and in doing so, they reminded everyone that sometimes the bravest teams are the ones who defend like their lives depend on it. Barcelona may be chasing a quadruple, but tonight they had to fight for a single goal, and Mallorca made them bleed for it. Now let's talk about the people. Not the team sheets, not the stats, the players. The ones who turned this match into something that breathed. Because this 1-0 wasn't about a single man of the match. It was a collective exhale, one held by everyone on that pitch, all pulling in different directions, some desperate to keep the score down, others desperate to push it up. We start with Dani Olmo. Of course we do. The goal scorer. The breaker of the deadlock. Not just a moment maker, but a mirror for the match itself. Quietly brilliant, constantly on the edge of danger, and then, bang! He's there, sweeping the ball into the far corner like he'd been rehearsing it in his mind all night. It wasn't a screamer. It didn't need to be. It was clean. It was clinical. It was a release. His movement, the way he slipped into the blind spot, the finish, it all screamed composure in a game built on chaos. That's the difference makers do. They don't need 20 chances. They need one window. He took it. But what about Lamine Yamal? Let's take a breath for this kid, because that's what he still is. A kid. But when he plays, he carries himself like he's auditioning for the role of future legend. It wasn't just the dribbles or the outrageous flicks or the one-on-one he should have scored. It was the courage. The willingness to demand the ball over and over again, even when things weren't falling for him. He twisted defenders into vapor. He made the pitch look wide when Mallorca tried to squeeze it narrow. He didn't score, no. But he set the rhythm. And then there's Pedri. Oh, Pedri. He glides. He doesn't run. He floats. This wasn't his loudest match. No goal, no assist. But he stitched everything together. When Barcelona were frustrated, he calmed the tempo. When they were desperate, he quickened it. He has this uncanny ability to look like he has time, even when surrounded. That kind of player is gold in matches like this, when nerves fray and decisions shrink. He's the metronome that never skips a beat. Now let's give credit to the defensive wall, Ronald Araujo and Eric Garcia. Araujo, who might be built from granite, was a one-man safety net. Whether it was high balls, last-ditch tackles, or pushing up to keep the press suffocating, he was there. And Garcia. Let's talk about that pass to Olmo, the kind of pass you don't try unless you trust the vision. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. And we have to mention Wojciech Szczesny. A passenger for most of the night, yes, but when he was needed, he was sharp. There was one moment, that cross fizzed in from the right, bodies flying, and Szczesny, calm as a monk, plucked it from the sky. Sometimes, doing nothing is doing something. But for all that Barcelona dominance, let's not forget the hero in the other net, Leo Roman. The man was a living wall. Save after save, parry after punch. He faced 40 shots. 40. He should have been picking the ball out of the net 4 or 5 times. But he didn't flinch. He read everything. He even denied Yamal one-on-one. That's more than a goalkeeper. That's a stubborn refusal to lose. Around him, Mallorca's backline bled for the badge. Rilo, who nearly grabbed a goal himself with that towering header, threw himself into every block like it was the last thing he'd ever do. Mojica on the flank, running himself into the dirt. And even when legs gave out, substitutions didn't lower the fight. Prats, Dominic, Lotto, they all came on and bought into the siege mentality. And Gavi. Let's not forget Gavi. It was one of those performances where the stats won't capture the fire. But you felt him, chasing lost causes, snapping into tackles, shooting from range, hitting the post. Arguing with the ref, Gavi was everywhere, a storm in boots. This is the kind of match where individuals matter because they add color to the collective. Barcelona were brilliant, but only because every cog turned. Mallorca were resilient, but only because every player bought into the struggle. So many stories in one match. But they all converge at that final whistle. 1-0. Victory by inches. Glory by grit. This has been Across the Pitch. Over and out.